Assalamualaikum and hello everyone. I am Tasnim Lokman and you're watching the Palestinian Diaries. Today we have a huge guest and I am very much honored to welcome him. He is Professor Peter Slezak. He's a Jewish anti-Zionism, anti-Zionist Palestinian rights campaigner. So he is a Jew. He grew up in a Jew family. His mother and his grandmother were Holocaust survivors. And he is also an Australian. He's a professor and he is pro-Palestinian for the past decades. He's been fighting for the rights of Palestinians, and what more so now in times of the Gaza atrocities that's been happening. So I'm glad to welcome him today here, Prof. Peter Slezak. Thank you so much for joining us today. So let's get to know him better now.
Look, it's relevant to our story that I'm Jewish. I grew up in the Jewish community in Sydney.
Mm-hmm.
An important part of the story is that both my parents were survivors of the Nazi Holocaust. I was born in Europe afterwards. My mother and grandmother survived the Auschwitz death camp, the Nazi concentration camp in Auschwitz, and I grew up with their stories. And that's an important part of how you think about things today, because the lessons to be learned from that are very important. But it's important for me to say that most Jews, I'm sorry to say, learned the wrong lesson.
Okay.
And notoriously, Jews generally in the world, and Israel especially, they've exploited the memory of the Holocaust to justify what Israel is doing. And one of my uncles went in one of those ships in that period in 1948. And the consequence of that was horrendous. There were massacres, there were expulsions, ethnic cleansing, before the war broke out. People don't know this. And the point I'm making is that the general public didn't know that story. That film makes out as though it was, you know, the slogan, a land without people for a people without land. This is a terrible lie.
Yeah.
I mean, the Palestinians, I often show pictures of how beautiful Palestine was and how rich the cultural life and intellectual and every life was, and they became swamped. The British sort of were also, you know, attacked by the Zionist Jewish militias. But in the end, they left. And in 1948, when Israel, 1947, at the partition, the British left. And the Jews took over. In fact, they took more than half the land.
Yeah.
It's a shocking story. Now, the massacres that were happening even before the state was declared, before the war broke out, they were happening before. People didn't know this. The idea was that this was some benign, you know, settlement. So it's a terrible story.
Yeah.
And ever since then, it's been awful. It's been, as they say, it's a settler colonial project, which is one of the last remaining after, in Australia, in America, and elsewhere, they exterminated the indigenous people. Well, that's what's happening in Palestine. But that story wasn't the way the West was told, and certainly not the Jewish community. And to this day, I just saw an interview by one of the leading Jewish propagandists denying what happened. Well, the leading historians are Jews that are telling this story. Ilan Pappé, Avi Shlaim, even Benny Morris, and of course the leading historians like Norman Finkelstein.
Yes.
There are very many significant Jews who are now telling this very bad story, and it's hard to swallow. In Israel, it's not being accepted, but that's the background. And we have to understand the background to understand what's happening today.
So you mean to say, like, you started exploring the truth in the 60s during the Vietnam War?
I was just exposed to it. I mean, I just started to read and discovered that the story was not what I grew up with. But I was a student in America in graduate school, and I ended up getting a job in philosophy. And in a way, it's funny, one thing leads to another. Because of my interest in Chomsky's linguistics and his politics, I ended up getting more and more involved in his work and the activists. In fact, interestingly, Chomsky came to Australia the first time, and I met him. I was privileged to be among the group.
Amazing.
He came for the East Timorese.
Oh, okay.
In whenever it was, just before East Timor exploded, the big massacre, really, by the Indonesians. He was invited to Australia by the Timorese to speak out for them. And because I was at the university, I said, if he's willing, and I'll get him to talk at the university, and then the university paid for the whole trip.
Wow.
So I became lucky because he became my guest at the university.
Oh, that's amazing.
And he gave 2 lectures, so I got to meet the greatest figure in my life, really, I have to say, the most important influence really on me, intellectually and academically, but also politically. So that's the interesting irony, but he was already so prominent in speaking out for causes, And of course then increasingly the more you read about the Israel-Palestine stuff, the more you felt you had to engage as a Jew.
Yeah.
That became, and is still extremely important. It's a voice that is attempted to be suppressed by the Zionists who want to pretend that we're somehow traitors and they say rude things about people like me. But it's growing. In America especially, significant Jews like Peter Beinart, who's a committed religious believer, have said some very powerful things. So there's a kind of a noticeable shift in the Jewish, especially in America. In Australia, the Jewish community is more conservative, but there too there are groups coming up. So it's a bit late, sadly, but there are signs that things may change.
So that's basically almost 50 decades, right? Since you started, I mean, since the Vietnam War, basically, when you started.
Don't make me sound so old.
Okay. So like, how do you think it has changed? I mean, in terms of like talking about it, discussions about it, publicity about it, you know, like knowledge and awareness about what's happening in Palestine, and also the Zionism ideology. You know, how has it changed gradually, or, you know, did social media help?
Yeah, that's having a big effect.
Yeah.
Look, Ilan Pappé, I mean, I admire and follow the insights of people like Ilan Pappé. He says a bit dramatically that actually this is the end of Zionism and it's the end of Israel. It's a pretty powerful thing to say. And the trouble is that at a time like this cataclysmic clash, things are perhaps worse than ever. There's no doubt about that. I mean, Gaza is just beyond description. It's an atrocity, a horror. But that's part of the point, that Israel, I think, sees that it's losing its reputation, its credibility around the world. In the public, the government's leaders are not supporting the Palestinians. They're sadly supporting Israel. But the general community around the world are aware because of social media. It's not in the mainstream press for the most part. So there's a noticeable shift in the attitude, as I say, even among Jews. But Israel can't sustain this in the eyes of the world. It's a bit like, it used to be inappropriate to compare it to the Nazis.
Okay.
That used to be taboo. Anybody who said that got into trouble. But now it's being said regularly by people who know what they're talking about. Now, it's not to compare the Holocaust. There's nothing to compare. The Holocaust was 6 million Jews and millions of other people. It's not the scale of the atrocities, but it's the attitudes, the racism, the deep dehumanization of the Palestinians. And sadly, it's happening among Jewish communities, and in Israel it's worst of all. So when you see, and I'm talking about Israelis who talk about it, Gideon Levy and various others who know, look, 90% of the Israelis agree with this genocidal attack on Gaza. A large proportion of them think they didn't go far enough.
Yeah.
This is very sick, and that's what we're up against.
So like, okay, I want to ask something maybe more in context to Malaysians, right?
Yeah.
Like, because you're a Jew and you practice it.
No, I don't.
Oh, okay.
No, let's be clear. I'm an atheist Jew.
Oh, okay.
We have to explain that. I gather that Malaysians don't quite understand these subtleties.
All right.
So, look, I'm a Jew because of my parents. I grew up as a Jew, and, you know, I have to say most Israelis and most Jews are not religious. They're not believers. They're not practitioners. They're Jewish as an ethnic identity.
Okay.
It's like being, I don't know, a Catholic.
Okay.
Or it's sort of like a family
it's just you're just part of it because your parents were part of it.
And I had a religious, ceremony when I was 13. Yeah. But I'm like, it's important that most Jews are secular. They're not believers.
Okay.
They go to the synagogue twice a year for the holidays. So as far as I'm concerned, it's not a religious matter, although for some it is. Peter Beinart is a religious Jew, and he speaks in religious terms about the crime that Jews are responsible for. That's a point of view which I don't share from the religious point of view. So anyway, just correcting.
Okay.
My Jewishness is an ethnic matter.
It's just by name.
But to go back to the point I made, it's very important. The leading thinkers point out that what we have above all is a shared humanity. We have to understand that these are secondary.
Yeah.
The difference between Muslims, and look at the best in these traditions. Traditions understand that our shared humanity is what is the most important.
How would you? Okay, so like, yes, we understand your situation, but generally, like, how does those who are more aware or woke are able to distinguish within Judaism and Zionism?
Yeah, that's a good question. Look, I have to say, the Zionists try to make sure you don't distinguish it.
Yes.
That's a very important matter. There's a definition, so-called IHRA definition, that's taken over in governments and all around the world, in Australia, at the universities. It's a definition of anti-Semitism. And most of the examples of anti-Semitism are criticizing Israel.
Yeah.
But that's terrible. It's a scandal to, as we say, weaponize anti-Semitism.
Yes.
Anti-Semitism exists, especially among right-wing fanatics. In Australia, I always say, and I got into a bit of trouble saying this, look, I grew up in Australia and I didn't experience any anti-Semitism living openly as a Jew.
Okay.
There wasn't any. So the Zionists want to make sure that you don't separate them.
Yeah.
So they can accuse any critic of Israel of saying you're an anti-Semite,
Yeah.
to shut them up. It's a way of trying to shut down criticism of Israel. Look, it's too stupid for words. It's amazing it's been so effective.
Yeah.
Because, okay, let's say somebody is an anti-Semite and a racist. What's that got to do with crimes against humanity and atrocities and genocide? Even if I'm an anti-Semite, these people are war criminals.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a distraction.
Yeah.
And it's understood to be a distraction. So we end up talking and spending a lot of time fighting against anti-Semitism
Yeah.
when we should be worrying about the genocide in Gaza.
Yeah.
And for that matter, in the West Bank. It's, Palestine is a terrible story. So it's a distraction, and unfortunately we're sucked into this. I've spent a lot of time pushing back and fighting. I was just testifying to our state parliament. There's an anti-Semitism inquiry. What the hell do they have an anti-Semitism inquiry for? I don't want to overstate it, but there's practically no anti-Semitism. It's criticism of Israel.
Yeah.
And actually, it's a bit stronger than that. The Jews have to understand that they can't avoid the criticism if they don't dissociate themselves from this.
Okay.
Israel is acting on behalf of Jews. The Jewish leadership are claiming to act on behalf of Jews. It's not possible to sit on the fence and be neutral. Jews have a responsibility, and I've said this publicly because I can say it. My Palestinian friends are a bit more careful. But there's a number of ways to explain this, but you can't sit on the fence. You are being implicated whether you like it or not. It's simply the way in which Israel and the Zionists are running this, and therefore there's a moral responsibility to distinguish, to stand against it, to oppose it. And I quote people like, there was I always quote this rabbi in America during the American civil rights movement, Joshua Heschel. He said, "Some are guilty, but all are responsible."
Oh, okay.
That's a very good point. And of course, the famous Desmond Tutu in South Africa.
Yes.
He said, it's very clever, he said it just exactly correctly, which is relevant to today, to the Jewish community. He said, in a time of injustice, to be silent is to stand with the perpetrator. Something like that.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
very powerful, because that's telling you. So when I got into trouble in Sydney for giving a public talk at a university, when I accused the Jews of having a responsibility,
Yeah.
they usually had this meltdown, this hysteria. But I'm trying to explain now what I meant. And it's important to say that you can't, and I can give you lots of stories. Forgive me for one other story. The very important Israeli journalist, Amira Haas,
Okay.
she's Jewish, of course, and she writes about her mother's experience, who was also in the concentration camp. And she tells her mother's story, who was being driven into the concentration camp, and she saw the German housewives watching by the side. And she referred to this despicable standing by the side. To be a bystander and be silent is morally terrible.
Yeah.
And that's the point that I'm trying to make, to say that we can't just be silent.
Quite on point. Since we're talking about that, in Malaysia, we generally support Palestine.
Yes.
We're very vocal about Palestine and the Palestinian aggression and genocide. But there are those who are unbothered because some would say it's a religious issue.
No, it's not.
It's an Islamic issue. And there are also other countries around the world, even in our region, that says exactly that. They choose to stay silent, or they choose to be on the middle ground. So what's your take on this framing? Like, why do you think it continuously persists?
Look, you can look at a lot of examples of history, but people basically lack decency, lack moral courage. I just watched a movie on the aeroplane about a case during the Second World War. People sided with the Nazis or were silent when the Nazis were... That's the lessons we're supposed to have learnt. There's a lot of history for this. And it's not a Muslim issue. Most of the Palestinians are Muslim, but there are Christian Palestinians. Some of my friends are Christian Palestinians. For example, I interviewed in Ramallah a little while ago Hanan Ashrawi. She's a Christian Palestinian leading figure. So it's not a religious issue for the reasons I said too. It's not fighting about religion. Mind you, while I'm saying something, it's disgraceful, as I said, the Zionists exploit this. So notoriously, one of the Israeli ambassadors, Danny Danon, there's a famous, infamous photograph of him at the United Nations.
Yeah.
He's holding up the Old Testament, that's the Jewish Bible, and he's saying, this is our title deed to the land. Excuse me. Well, this is so, I can't even express how disgraceful I find that. But that's the way they want to present it, as if they have some rights. I have more rights in Palestine. I'm a Jew from Europe, and Australian citizen. I have no connection to Palestine.
Yeah.
I have more rights in Palestine than my Palestinian friends, who are still holding the key to their parents' house because they were expelled and not allowed back, and then not allowed back. What kind of country? And by the way, Israel, of course, is a racist endeavor because one of the definitions says that you can't call Israel a racist never. 50 laws on the books in Israel discriminate against the Palestinian citizens of Israel, the citizens. They passed a nation-state law in 2018 which says Israel is the state of the Jewish people. That's a racist endeavor. So that's the problem. And people like me around the world, Jews who have nothing to do with Israel, claim some rights there. That's really seriously bad.
Yeah, that's kind of ironic. How does it go around? Meaning to say, like, maybe I think I'm more interested to understand how a Jewish family decides to go to Israel and just be part of it and just claim their rights there. Like, maybe you have more friends who actually have possibly experienced this. Like, maybe you could tell all of us, like, how it happens technically.
It's the upbringing. Look, I grew up with kids, I told you, they went to summer camp and they were all Zionist camp. And they do what's called aliyah. They actually move to Israel and become citizens.
Yeah.
They think this is a great honor. And the misinformation and their prejudices fuel this. They just believe that this is a great cause to move there. Mind you, a lot are leaving now. A lot of Israelis have dual citizenship.
Yeah.
And huge numbers are leaving because, for good reason. There's this mythology that your home is Israel and that's where you belong. They even try to say that because now there's supposedly anti-Semitism, which is not exactly correct, they say that you're better off going to Israel. Well, that's nonsense. So the idea that you should go to Israel to be safe currently is a pretty stupid thing to say. But the answer to your question is the education that we all grew up with. By the way, I mentioned before the Passover service. Every year Jews have this Passover, which is the story of Exodus. In the Bible, Moses led the Jews out to the Holy Land. It's significant. Every Jew grows up with that.
Okay.
And part of that story, I've written about this because I didn't realize till much later in life. I did it every year with my family. Jews, went with Moses and discovered their home that God gave to them. And at the end of the service, there's two parts to it, but at the very end of the service, every year, every Jew says, they hold up the glass of wine and drink a toast and say, next year in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
What's that all about? What, every Jew's going to go to Jerusalem? But this is the bullshit that basically everybody grows up with, that somehow this is the promised land.
Yes.
And look, I mean, a lot of people have written about it. Whatever happened or didn't happen, I mean, most of that is a mythology. The Old Testament and the myths are really fairy stories, I have to say. But whatever happened thousands of years ago gives no rights to me to take the land from the people that have been living there for time immemorial.
Okay. And politically, what do you think about how Israel is handling themselves as a state with all other countries globally?
It's a criminal state.
Yeah.
I mean, their leaders are all war criminals. The International Court of Justice has actually indicted Netanyahu and Gallant, I think, and one of the other ones.
Yeah.
The Prime Minister of Australia has been referred to the International Criminal Court. It's a crime in international law to be an accessory to the genocide.
Yes.
So these people are, I mean, to his credit, the new candidate for mayor in New York actually said if Netanyahu came to New York, he'd arrest him.
Okay.
Well, that's exactly right. My Prime Minister didn't say that, which he should.
Yeah.
So the world is avoiding the serious moral crisis. It's not new.
Yeah.
I mean, and I can't avoid mentioning, of course, in passing, the West Bank. We're not paying attention to the West Bank.
I agree.
That is a horror. I've been there. I've travelled there. We're doing a documentary about what's going on there. It's not in the news. They're demolishing houses. They're rampaging around, shooting kids dead. It's beyond awful. And the mainstream media are not showing it. Now, maybe Malaysia is better because the sympathy for Israel, for Palestine is here. That's very different. To the great credit of the Malaysians and the people here, they're much more sensitive and sympathetic to this. There's an important boycott movement and Palestinian solidarity activists here. That's really important. In other countries, the government and the people are nowhere near as sensitive and informed.
You know, there's this take by the Western leaders that are saying that it's the Palestinians who are not looking for peace.
That's bullshit.
And I definitely agree.
But the history is so false.
Yeah.
See, the trouble is that you have to do your homework and you've got to go and read what was said. I used to have to research this because people kept saying that. So if you go back and you look at the attempts to make the so-called peace process, firstly, I can give you all the references. It was a fraud. It was a trap. The Palestinians were constantly being just tricked. The Camp David, the Oslo agreements, these were all betrayals of the Palestinians, taking away from them rights that they should have had. So the so-called peace process, it was run by the Americans after all, and it was run by one of the Zionists, an Australian Zionist, whatever his name was, Ivor Indik, I think, or Indik. The peace process, you can read about it, it was a fraud. And actually, even Hamas has repeatedly tried to make a permanent peace. So the media constantly point out that Hamas is this terror organization, you can't make peace with them. It's all rubbish.
Okay.
So one has to understand the history.
You have to, but there's on top of that, on top of like the fact that they're saying that Palestinians are the ones not looking for peace, they are also saying that, you know, Palestinians keep giving this victimhood identity crisis kind of thing, and we all know this is just intentional, this is all an agenda, but yet they're still in power. All these Western leaders are still controlling the situation.
But you know, the example you give is really shocking. It's sick. If you read, you probably don't read the Jewish press like I do.
Okay.
They're wallowing in what happened on October 7, which is pretty bad. It was an atrocity. It was a terrorism. They haven't paid attention to what's going on in Gaza. Gaza has been flattened.
Yeah.
And you talk about who thinks they're victims. It's hard to imagine the pathology of people, the Jewish communities, the Zionists and the whole Jewish community, thinking that they're the victims.
Yeah.
I read this stuff. I'm staggered because it's a degree of pathology. I mean, they're sick. This is a kind of a deep, I don't know how to describe it. How is it possible for people? I mean, Israel is the fourth most powerful nation militarily in the world. Yeah. It's just flattened Gaza. And they're the victims? I mean, I'm avoiding swearing, but I feel like swearing.
Yeah. Also, like, what do you think about the whole process, the whole situation where suddenly Iran came into in the game? And I mean, everybody's now so focused on World War III, where like the whole genocide is happening.
Netanyahu has been for decades trying to provoke Iran.
Okay.
They've been claiming, falsely again, that Iran is 5 minutes away from a nuclear bomb. Every year he's 5 minutes away. So for a decade they've been 5 minutes away or a year away. It was a deliberate attempt to provoke, in particular, America to come in, which they did finally. To the credit of the Iranians, they showed enormous restraint. They could have done a lot more damage to Israel for the first time they attacked, and they even signaled some of the attacks they were going to make as a kind of a gesture.
Yeah.
So that's playing with fire. The idea that Netanyahu wants to, I mean, he has had an agenda to attack all of these other countries, and there's some good discussions online about this. And America has supported all of these. He wanted America to attack Iraq, which they did. And Israel is a rogue state. And people like Norman Finkelstein and others will talk this way. It's not a normal state. And unfortunately, it's given too much respect in the international forums. And we have to understand how serious it is for the whole world.
Prof, could you share with us some of the Holocaust stories that you've grown up with?
Sure. Okay. Change gear a bit.
Yeah, let's just like take it.
I'm happy to talk about it. I mean, it's an important. I have to tell you, did I mention for the first time in my life I have an opportunity? I'm going to a conference in Warsaw in Poland.
Oh wow, that's amazing.
And I've never been to Poland, and I have to go to the concentration camp in Poland, the Auschwitz camp, where my mother was. I grew up with all that, and I can't not go. I'm a bit scared of going. It's going to be very difficult for me, actually, emotionally.
Yeah.
So let me tell you where it starts. My mother told me her experience when first they were forced from their homes in the town where she was living, where I was born, a town called Sotmar in Romania. Satu Mare is the Romanian name. And they were rounded up in the ghetto and lived there, but then they were transported in cattle trucks.
Okay.
This is the story.
How old was she?
She was 19. 19,
wow.
I have a picture of her, a movie, in fact, a black and white film of her at 19, and her mother would have been, I don't know, 30, 40, whatever she was. And 19-year-old kid, she was in this cattle truck, and they finally ended up in Poland, in Auschwitz. And when she got out of the cattle truck, I can tell you one first A lot of people died in the cattle truck from starvation and
Okay.
thirst. It was a cattle truck.
Yeah.
And I don't know how long it took them to go. When they got there, my mother got out of the cattle truck, and she was a 19-year-old girl, holding her little nephew, little 3-year-old.
Okay.
And as she went forward to the lineup where Mengele, the notorious Dr. Mengele, who was separating out people,
Okay.
some people would go straight to the gas chambers, and some people were spared. And mothers and children went straight to the gas chamber. And my 19-year-old mother's holding the little kid, and she goes, and she looked back, and her mother was unwell. So she gave the kid to her cousin, also a 19-year-old girl, and she went and got her mother. The 19-year-old and the kid went straight to the gas chamber.
Oh my God.
And my mother, because she went to get her mother, they went that way. And that's the beginning of the stories I grew up with about the accidental fate, the flukes which determine whether... And I had a whole series of stories like that. Auschwitz, you can imagine.
That's insane.
If you've seen any stuff about it. That was the beginning,
That's just like 1 second of...
of course. And in fact, one of the women came up. I saw another woman say this when they do these documentaries, where they were met by some of the inmates in their striped clothes. And
Yeah.
one woman said, "You see the smoke in the chimney there? That's your family going up there." That's the stories that, it's pretty grim.
Yeah.
And that was Auschwitz, the crematoria and the gas chambers. There are lots of stories like that. But one of the perhaps better stories in a way is how my mother was saved. The Russians were pressing and militarily were going to, as they did, come and take over Auschwitz. It was the Russians who liberated Auschwitz. But the Germans moved a lot of the inmates. They started to clear the camp.
Okay.
And there was this death march, they called it, and they were going somewhere, I don't know exactly where. And at one point, my mother and her mother decided to hide in a drain in a village because they didn't think this was going to end well. And they hid, and when they came out, they were looking at something, and a nun from the Catholic convent tapped them on the shoulder and saw who they were and took them into the convent and looked after them.
Oh, wow.
So my mother was saved by Catholic nuns
Yeah.
and brought back to health. There's a lot of stories about that, but that was the beginning.
How,
of the
when did she manage to escape? How old was she when she managed to escape?
1920. She was there from 1944 till whenever it was liberated or when they
Okay.
cleared the camp. So it was late. It was that last stage.
It was like 5 years?
No. She wasn't there that long. I think she was there for 9 months, nearly a year.
Oh, okay.
She was only there for about 9 months. But that was 9 months of
Torture?
of starvation and deaths. People were, on the death march, my mother said, the Nazis who were taking them, one mother sat down with, she couldn't walk anymore, and the German came up and insisted she goes, and her daughter was with her, and they refused to go. He just shot them both dead.
That's crazy.
These were the stories I grew up with.
Oh my God.
mother's stories of these horrors, and most Jews in my age, that's why they were so imbued with these horror stories. But as I told you, they learnt the wrong lesson. What's the lesson from this?
Yeah.
And now, I don't know how to put this exactly, but if you're watching what Israel is doing in Gaza, it's stories like that. It's beyond description. I don't want to describe them, but
Yeah.
you would have seen, and if you've seen enough on social media, because the journalists, Israel has killed so many journalists there,
Yeah.
medical people. The medical people are reporting what they're seeing.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking. Well, I once got asked the question, how can Jews be doing this? That's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't know how to answer that.
There's no answer to
There's
that.
no answer to that.
It's insane.
That's my role. It has become, it's rather strange. I was busy with my academic life, and
Yeah.
this is taking over in a way because you feel you have to do something. It's too desperate.
Yeah, you were saying that you're a professor. You were teaching at the University of New South Wales. Yeah, New South Wales. So how was it there? Like, I'm sure because you had students. How was that when it comes to discourse on Palestinian or just humanities or the unjust world?
Well, look, I was teaching philosophy and history of science and philosophy of science, Galileo, and various other interesting things.
Yeah.
And cognitive science, linguistics. So I wasn't teaching politics. But I would talk to the students after class.
Yeah.
I did run one class, which I turned into a political class.
Okay.
But I got students to read classics in the field of philosophy of politics. Edward Said, I got them to read, and John Stuart Mill about free speech, and Arundhati Roy, the wonderful Indian writer, and a whole list of, and Chomsky, of course. And I got them to read, and that was a lot of fun. It was getting students I'll tell you something I had to say to the students in the first lecture. I said to them, because there's this culture at the moment where students have to feel safe. You can't upset students. And I said to the students in the first class, this is not a safe space.
Okay.
You're supposed to make students feel safe. And I said, this is not a safe space for ideas you don't like.
Okay.
This is, you shouldn't be at a university if you don't want to hear provocative ideas which challenge you. It's a reflection on the universities now. We're not supposed to upset students. Well, I made a point of upsetting them my whole career, which I was very proud of. And I think that's what you should do as an academic. That's your job, to make people uncomfortable and question, challenge their beliefs, not just in politics, but in everything. And of course that's uncomfortable. So the second lecture is rather funny. I used to say this every semester. And one girl, student, she missed the first class. And when I said something very provocative in the second lecture, she said, what right have you got to say this? I said, you missed the first class where I explained why, we're going to be reading things. I give you an example of something I gave the students. I had some Vietnamese students in the class. I gave them some of Chomsky's stuff on the Vietnam War, which is very confronting for them because they were on the wrong side. These are the Vietnamese who fled. They were the American allies. Well, they were supporting the Vietnamese, the Americans. They were on the American side. And of course they lost. And so these kids who grew up with parents who fled, they found it very confronting. But I was very proud of that class. I thought it was a wonderful example to openly... Look, I have a record of this, and I'm proud of it for the following reason. I have my views, strong views, but I used to teach a course on philosophy of religion.
Okay.
And the reason that's relevant is it was sort of political, bit really, but in a way, because I'm an atheist. But I gave the students the strongest arguments on the religious side. I had a large number of students who were Christians, the campus Bible study Christians, and a few Muslims as well.
Wow, okay.
But I gave them the best articles on their side of the story, and then we argued about it. That's how you should do it. You confront, the students loved it. In other words, my biases, I'm not trying to pretend I don't have views. I shouldn't. A lot of academics think they should be neutral. Well, no. No, but I'm better than neutral because I'm not neutral, but I'm fair. I give the students the best arguments, even better than they thought of, on their side, and then we argue about it.
It's like super interesting you're talking about like having blunt discussions, right? Like facing and confronting and trying to have, you don't have to agree, but you have a fair conversation.
Well, you have to learn how to disagree.
Yes, learn how to disagree, exactly. And do you think like the new generation today, the younger generation that's coming continuously, everybody's like extremely hurt every time they hear something that is the opposite of their beliefs?
Bad luck. I mean, look, that's the experience I had. Look, my Christian students, they were very committed, and we read strong arguments against their views. One interesting experience I had, I came out of the class once, and one of the Christian girls was crying. And I thought, oh, goodness, I must have done it. I was too strong or something. I said something to upset her, and I asked her, what's the matter? Why are you upset? She said, it's nothing I said. It's that she was an American who came from the South, from North Carolina or somewhere, and she suddenly realized that she doesn't belong in her community anymore.
Oh, okay.
Her mind opened. She had an open mind. She discovered there's different views.
Yeah.
Well, that was a good thing. So it was confronting for her. I didn't upset her, but it was the fact that she learned and thought independently.
Yeah.
That's.
But like when we come back to this, people are very critical of Gen Zs, like of Gen Zs, and also like the younger generation where they're like constantly hurt. They're constantly like
I've got
offended.
no patience for that.
Yeah, like but now you see a lot of them are also very, very vocal. Like there's like two extremes, I guess. Where do you see you've gone through a lot of teaching and generations of people? Like where do you see we're headed when it comes to like opening conversations, freedom of speech?
Well, it's not going in a good direction. Freedom of speech is being challenged all over the place.
Yeah.
They're clamping down now in America especially and even in Australia. So we have to be vigilant and we have to push back against that. Universities have actually done some very bad things. In Australia, for example, we abolished what's called tenure.
Okay.
Years ago. I wrote an article about this because that was a major change. Academics didn't realize what a bad move that was. Tenure in America is sacrosanct.
Okay.
It's a very important institution where once you get tenure, you can't be sacked.
Oh, wow. Okay, tenure, okay.
Tenure, T-E-N-U-R-E. And the reason for that is that, like judges in America, in the old days, before Trump, when you appointed a judge, they were then free to make judgments on the merits of the case,
Yeah.
regardless of their particular prejudices, but they couldn't fear that their job would be on the line.
Yeah.
Now, academic tenure, I read a book about this because I tried to understand what's the motivation. Tenure was to protect you against being sacked for saying unpopular things, saying things that people don't like. And so if you're an academic, you should be protected regardless of what your views are. That's what academic freedom is. That's what free speech should be. That's why I gave my students John Stuart Mill, famous essay on free speech. We've lost that. So, this one move, I was very angry about it, and I wrote about it in Australia because the academics themselves gave away tenure. They traded it in for a salary increment one year.
Wow.
They didn't realise in Australia what they had done. In America, still it's protected. It may be being eroded, but tenure is a crucial institution because you protect unpopular views.
Yeah.
And that's
since we're talking about universities and opinions and stuff, since October 7, I think, we've seen a whole load of protests, like never before for Palestine, right?
Yeah.
For Gaza. One of the major things that happened in the States was all the universities that camped out and went all out. And then there was so much brutality
That's right, exactly.
from the police and from the government themselves. What's your take on that? Seeing how
That was a shocking example. In America, we saw a lot of that. At my university, Columbia University, there were some very, very significant encampments. One of the things to say about that, there were always very visible presence of Jews.
Okay.
So these weren't anti-Semitic Jews.
Yeah.
And in Australia, I went to the encampments and I spoke at the encampments. I was privileged to be invited to speak to the students. And there was always a Jewish presence. That's the first thing. The administrations got heavy-handed. They decided this was terrible. It's anti-Semitism. The Jewish community, of course, got hysterical about it. But it was a good sign. It was a sign, like in the 60s, when students at the campuses were at the forefront. Look, I made the point when one of the speeches I gave is the politicians and the media took too long to even react to this. It was the students who were at the forefront, pleading and demanding justice and the truth. And so it has always been the campuses where the first...
It starts there.
And that's to their credit. That's been suppressed. There's a lot of pressure to quiet students down, to get on with, this sort of neoliberal corporate approach to education, to stop students thinking independently and critically. The organisations for them to meet have been limited in various ways. It's not a good thing. So these demonstrations, these encampments were very important.
And what you saw happening in Harvard, right? It was that was extreme.
Which thing?
I think when they started clamping out and they started arresting all.
Yeah, they started brutalizing. The brutality of the police. Professors were being manhandled off. That's the scary thing about how quickly a kind of fascist mindset can be taken over. Here in Australia, you saw I say here in Australia, back in Australia, a young demonstrator was blinded by the policeman in one eye just the other day.
Yeah, her father was the Attorney General of Malaysia.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah,
that.
she was the nominee. She was the candidate against the Prime Minister, right? Albanese.
Oh, she's a Greens candidate.
Yeah, Hannah Thomas.
That's what I did. Yeah, that's
Hannah Thomas.
That.
So,
well, what kind of brutality? And I'm at the demonstrations every week now for a year, more than a year, and I speak. I'm proud to speak at the demonstrations. There was at first a very big police presence because there was this hysteria. The government made out that this was all scary.
Yeah.
Well, I'm there. It's not scary. It's not anti-Semitic, and it's peaceful, but it's strong. They're protesting, so it's important.
One thing about protesting, right? When we see it on video in Western countries, especially like the UK, US, and even Australia, the numbers are huge. It's massive. But in Malaysia, despite being very, very pro-Palestine, we don't get as much numbers.
How interesting.
As we'd like.
Yeah.
But I don't know, maybe it's the culture. It's not a very protesting
There's another
culture.
reason. I don't understand Malaysia that well, but maybe because the government here is generally sympathetic. You don't need it here.
Okay.
We need it.
Okay.
Our government is shocking. And so actually the anger is more appropriate and justified in Australia or in America. Our government has been shocking on this. They're basically complicit. They're accomplices. And our Prime Minister is on the left, but they've done nothing. And the Foreign Minister, and I was very proud. I gave one of the talks and I swore in Arabic at the Prime Minister and I got a big cheer from the crowd.
Okay.
I won't repeat it here.
Okay, all right.
You were worried I was going to say it, but I won't.
Okay, so we're about to end, but I just want your take on the future as moving forward. It's it's already so near to October already. It's already mid-year. We're already in July. And a few months is going to be another year of
Yeah.
like 3 years since
2 years.
2 years since October 7. 2 years, yeah. 2 years since October 7, and it's insane because I don't know what else can you be bombing because you're still bombing and
Unbelievable.
insane insanity. So could you give like some words of encouragement to everybody who's fighting for it, who's fighting against the Zionism, but also like what can we do as a
Tough
whole?
question. How to be? You can't be optimistic given how shocking it is and how the world has not reacted properly.
Yeah.
I mean, some people are starting to talk a bit late of military intervention. I mean, it would be possible for, a military force, to just simply go in there.
Yeah.
I don't know why nobody's done that yet, but who would do it?
Yeah.
I mean, these flotillas, this one little boat goes in, and of course it doesn't.
Yeah, what do you think about Greta?
Yeah, and a couple of years ago, before Gaza, that Mavi Marmara, they shot them up on the way to Gaza. So the only sign of hope I can think of is, as I mentioned, slowly popular resistance and dissent and protest. It had effects in other places. I mentioned always the Vietnam War ended because in America, the protest movement, the horror, when they started to see how bad it was, grew. East Timor ended because of pressure from outside. And in the end, that made a difference. Apartheid ended. I don't know what else. We will do what we can do. The boycott movement, Malaysia has a very proud record of standing up, and the boycott movement has now become actually almost legally mandated. It's become, the International Court is requiring people not to be complicit. It used to be just a movement of activists, and Malaysia has a very proud, wonderful record of supporting the boycott movement, but that would be a good start. So we need to press internationally. It's so late now. I mean, in a way, it's too little and too late for the people in Gaza, but still, they need to be saved insofar as it's possible now.
But do you think, how should it be saved? Like, do you think, like, you know what Trump has been pushing for, like, everybody must leave?
Well, that's ethnic cleansing. It's a crime. Look, one thing, they should be all taken to the International Court of Justice. They should all be tried for war crimes. That's the first thing. People have been talking about, I keep saying, a military intervention. I mean, what else can you do? Why doesn't, what did they used to call it, a coalition of the willing? It used to be called when they went into Iraq. Well, why don't we have a coalition of the willing simply to send a flotilla, armed flotilla? What else can you do to stop this horror? I don't know what the answer is. To be honest, I don't think anybody really knows what to do, but the big powers have to be forced into this. And even if it was like arrest warrants that are acted on in some way to shock the people, look, I'm lost for knowing what to say, but activists around the world are all doing whatever we can do. And I think we just have to keep up the pressure and be creative. And certainly popular understanding is important because that generates a kind of a strong feeling, and governments in the end have to act.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much,
Thank you very
Professor.
much.
Thank you so much. So thank you for being here with us, and I really appreciate, and it's incredible to hear from you yourself as well. So thank you so much, guys, for listening. This is Professor Peter Slezak, right? And that was, I hope we have more conversations in the future. And thank you so much, guys. Don't forget to follow Sinar Daily on all social media platforms.